Good day to you. God bless you. Say welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Welcome to this family Bible study hour. We're ready to get back into our Father's Word. How precious it is. The promise has been made to Abram. As you know, his name will be changed to Abraham soon, which translates fully a blessed father of many nations, or that he would be a blessing to many people. There is one point from the last lecture I want to bring up just in passing. You'll remember that Abraham was 75 when God made the covenant with him, saying that he would be successful, that his seed would be blessed, and that he would be a blessing to all peoples, that he was 75 years old. And within this comes the secret as to why in the book of Acts that 430 years would be mentioned. Okay? Now bear with me, and I will bring this up again as we get back in the 22nd chapter, first chapter, somewhere along in there. It would be 100 years old that he would be when this child was born, for Sarai was barren at this time. And naturally, 75 to 100 would be 25 years. And then Isaac, it would be 5 years before that seed would be dedicated. That gives you your 30 years, making it 430 years, as mentioned in the book of Acts, as into the captivity. That will fall in place, but as we had passed his age being 75, that's the base that you must figure from as far as 430 years concerning captivity is concerned. Okay, so Abram and Sarai, and incidentally her name Sarai meaning my princess, will be changed to Sarah, which means princess. Why? Because it was still this woman, through her would come the seed that would be Messiah. Okay, so they are leaving Babylon. They're coming out of confusion. Lot, his nephew, is with him, and they're moving on into Egypt. Verse 11. So chapter 12, verse 11, and it reads, "And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai, his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon." Now bear in mind, if Abraham is 75, she's 65. And she was fair, and the people of Egypt especially were fond of beautiful, or I'm going to get myself in a box here, all men are appreciative of beautiful women, of women, period. But my point being, at 65, she's still a knockout. And I use that terminology to say she was just downright a beautiful woman. And makes him a little nervous, so what does he do? Verse 12. "Therefore it shall come to pass," Abram continues, "when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive." In other words, many people have difficulty with this, as I suppose we all do to a degree. I mean, here, this is his wife, this beautiful woman, and he's going to, naturally, with he being the husband, they would have killed him. But being a brother, as he's going to request, hey, they're going to take care of the good brother. All right, watch, verse 13. Abram continues his instructions to Sarai. "Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee." Now what does this document? To me, it documents that Abraham had a great deal of trust for Sarai. He knew, even though she was posing as his sister, or would pass as her sister, that naturally they're going to keep her brother alive if that should be the way things would go. But also, he was not lying, because as we find in chapter 20, verse 12, she was his sister. By that I mean she was his half-sister, for it reads in chapter 20, verse 12, "And yet indeed, Abraham would say, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father," that would be Terah, "but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife," meaning that she was a half-sister. I believe from the time of Seth to this point that it was not that unusual for families to naturally, to basically intermarry at this distance, or cousins, because there were not that many of them. I mean, you start with Seth, so it was approved at this time. And you are now in a phase of the law that God has not spoken out against this yet. So he was telling the truth, documenting in my mind that he trusted Sarai to know that whether they were together or apart, he could trust her. She was a very bright woman. So, and neither was he lying concerning the sistership. I believe you that have companion Bibles, you have an appendix number 29 that will document that. Okay? Now, verse 14 as we continue. "And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was very fair." 15. "The princes also of Pharaoh saw her." The princes, plural that is to say, saw her and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. In other words, this would be a house that was grooming her, or as the kings would say, through a process of cleansing, that to be taken as a wife to Pharaoh. Okay? Verse 16. "And he entreated Abram well for her sake." Abram had it fixed up pretty well, did he not? "And he had sheep and oxen, and he asses, and men servants, and maidservants, and she asses, and camels." Abram was a rich man, and the Pharaoh was taking good care of his future brother-in-law to be. And Abram certainly didn't refuse them. He accepted them. We might just say a word here just a moment, that following God is enriching in more ways than one. And because God's blessings, and as much as God owns everything, it is wonderful, and it does improve your life. God knows, and God always has a way of touching hearts and minds and peoples. But at the same time, Abram, his faith is unshakable. God has already promised him in the 4 verses of this very chapter that he's going to be a blessing to all nations. So, coming from God, he knows he's not going to die. He knows that God's word will come to pass exactly as promised. So his faith never wavers. And he knew that whatever was necessary, that God would intervene. There would be divine intervention. What I want you to draw from this, though we are not Abrahams, and though we are not Sarai's, and yet in a sense you are followers of that same faith, do you not think that God will not bless you if your faith is that strong as well? Faith moves mountains. Don't ever forget it. Mountains meaning nations, symbolically speaking. So let your faith always be strong, and prepare yourself to receive the blessings of God. It's just, I could not pass up the opportunity to teach what I feel was in Abraham's mind, his sure knowledge from God's promise back to verse 2 and 3 of this same chapter, that God would let nothing happen to him or to Sarai, who naturally it would take the two to bring forth the seed, and not even questioning, even though Sarai was barren. Interesting. What? Now, verse 17, as we continue. And the Lord, here's the divine intervention, the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Naturally. It's through this woman. It would be Satan, of course, that would try again to destroy the woman. He always, Satan never misses an opportunity. But the thing that dampens Satan's spirit is your faith. Don't ever forget that. Okay. It is not written here what happened, but I had taken you to chapter 20, verse 12 a moment ago. If you would continue to the last verse, I believe it is, or next to the last of that 20th chapter, you would find in another case, because of Sarai, that God closed all the wombs of in this case, the Egyptians. So that's why something's going to give pretty quick here, okay? Verse 18, and Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Question. I'm sure this was quite a tense moment. Verse 19. Why saidst thou, she is my sister, so I might have taken her to me to wife? Now, therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. You depart. In other words, it was obvious to this Egyptian Pharaoh that Abram's God was powerful and had actually shut down all of Egypt because of this one woman. And inasmuch as this is the woman, umbilical cord to umbilical cord, through who the Christ child would come, naturally our Heavenly Father took that very serious. Verse 20. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. He got to keep the sheep and the oxen and all the riches that he had gained here while he was with a good old Pharaoh. So God always enriches his own. That's just the way he operates. That's God's M.O. when you practice the faith. I do not believe that Abraham ever had a doubt. God had already interceded to the point that he knew he would be okay. Okay, chapter 13, verse 1. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. In other words, we have the nephew and his servants. Lot also was quite a wealthy man, no doubt. I don't want to say it was his faith, but he was a just man in that sense, but he would take advantage of his old uncle a little bit if he had the opportunity. Verse 2. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. God always, I suppose that this is the first rich man mentioned in God's Word. I don't suppose, I know it is. It's the first one mentioned. And his faith, I feel, is what gained him this, with his ability to function in a community. Verse 3, that means he was intelligent. Verse 3, and he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, that's to say the house of God, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Hai. That's between Bethel to say the house of God, and Hai to say a ruin, a heap. Verse 4, you remember what he did there, okay? He built an altar prior to this. 4, unto the place of the altar, there you have it, which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. That's something you want to always remember. At a change, you want to call on the Father always, but especially when you're making a change, such as Abraham is following God's orders, and naturally he seeks out Father's guidance. He seeks out our Father's direction. At the altar, it would be, let's look at how many people would have looked at this when they got back to Bethel and Ai with so much more property. Boy, you can almost hear them. Boy, I really put it over on those Egyptians, didn't I? That was really sharp of me. Here I have cattle and I have land and I'm a very impressive person. Let all the community come out and let me tell them how great I am. What a great man, blessed of God, in following him, and how that I was able to move through Egypt without any harm. Yeah. What did Abram do, though? He called on God because he knew it was God that had taken care of him. So always be careful, my friend. I had made a statement that Abram was a wise man. What made him a wise man? He was wise enough to know that all wisdom comes from God, and you had better thee well give God the credit for the help that God gives you rather than taking credit for it yourself. All right? Verse 5. And Lot also, here comes the nephew, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Actually, he's kind of rich too, all right? Looking at the example that his uncle set forth, 6. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. In other words, between both families, the herds were so large and they were so rich, let's tell it like it is, that the land itself could not support the herds, which at this time really was money in the bank, all right, that was riches. The herds could not graze or live from the soil where they were both camping in the same area. So we got to split, all right, verse 7. And there was strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. You want to know where the strife came from? Anytime it mentions Canaanites, and no doubt there were Kenites among them. You'll find it out in the 15th chapter when we get there, and as well as you'll find out. In the Perizzite, it is believed by many scholars, and I certainly go along with it, was part of the second influx of the Nephilim, the fallen ones. All right, so there was when you have Perizzite, meaning belonging to the village, they took advantage of villages, so to speak. All right, especially Sodom and Gomorrah. So here we have trouble. This is where, in your own family, and I mean this is family, it's an uncle and his nephew. And their herders, their herdsmen, are strife, meaning they're about to come to blows over this. What do you do? Well, let's gather up sides and fight it out. No. Never let that kind of trouble happen in your family. Especially when you know there are Canaanites and Perizzites near. Abraham was wise enough, and his faith in God was firm enough. Don't take from this that Abram was a weak man and a coward. You would be in grave error if you were to do that, but it's family. So what does he do? He uses common sense, and you should always as well as ordering that is wicked or evil out from your midst. Verse 8, and Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. It should never happen among brethren, beloved. So, verse 9, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. In other words, we will split the herds, move the herdsmen apart, whereby there is plenty of grazing for everyone. You know, a shepherd, when his animals are suffering, it hurts. When you're in charge for animals, and God did place man in charge of animals, and quite frankly, you take an old rancher farmer, such as myself, don't ever mistreat an animal in front of me. Don't starve your animals if there's any help for it at all, or you will be corrected for it. As well, it's just nature. It is nature. When animals are dumb, they're not really dumb, but by that I mean they can't help their condition if you have them pinned. They depend on you to take care of them. So what I'm saying is this, no doubt, along with the agitation that the Canaanites, which had Kenites mixed among them, and when we get to the 15th chapter, I'll explain that in more clarity. I'm sure that would be ample reason to agitate the pot and the water. Verse 10, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan. Jordan means the descender, and that means the old Jordan River was coming down through there. There was water, plenty of water, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou camest unto Zoar. In other words, it was obvious that before God destroyed it, this was a good place. Now, which do you think Lot's going to take? Naturally, Lot's going to take the water, not the desert. Verse 11. And then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan. And Lot journeyed east. And they separated themselves the one from the other. This would end the strife for Abram, not necessarily for Lot. Verse 12. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched his tent toward Sodom. I want you to note, he dwelt in cities. And remember, woe to those that join house unto house. Verse 13, the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Talk about strife, he stepped in it. 14, and the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art northward and southward, eastward and westward. You look all around. 15, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. How good God is. I mean, as far as you can see, it's all yours. And so it was that God blessed Abram. 16, and I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. This is a heavenly blessing. This is divine intervention. Do you understand? They didn't even have a child. Sarai was barren. And here he's telling him, you're not even going to be able to number your children. And do you know something? That prophecy has come true. The children of Israel, which is the children we speak of, the descendants of Abraham through Isaac, as the seed is called. Certainly, they are a blessed people even on this earth to this day, as many of those tribes would travel north over the Caucasus Mountain and be called Caucasians and settle Europe, Canada, America, and God blesses them still yet, as far as you can see. Verse 17, arise and walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, and I will give it unto thee. It's yours. That's God's blessings. Verse 18, and then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, that's strength or fatness, fertile, which is in Hebron, meaning alliance, and you hear of Hebron yet even to this day, same place, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Always bringing God into the equation. Do you do that in your life? That's something you never want to forget, is always keep God in the equation of your life if you want his blessings. You know, if you're a doubter, you even doubt that God exists, do you think he's going to bless you? Of course he's not. Why should he? You haven't done anything to deserve it. And God only blesses those that serve him, love him, and consider themselves to be family. If you don't consider yourself to be family, sorry, you're out. This is a kind of an irritation when you hear simple-minded people say, well, why does God not bless all people? Because all people don't bless God. They don't love him. Why should he? And so it is. Then whose fault does the shortcomings fall at? Whoever's in charge, the adults. That's who to blame, not our Heavenly Father. And so it is. Abram loved our father. He always had that altar nearby, and our father knew that. Therefore, what happened? God always blessed him. Chapter 14, verse 1. Now, we're going to be among some foreigners, and you're going to have some foreign names. Here they come. Verse 1, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, that's to say the keeper of the gods, what a name, king of Shinar, that's Babylon, another name for Babylon, Arioch, vulnerable, king of Elashar, Chedorlaomer, that is to say, which is that's to say severity of servant rather of Gomer, king of Elam, meaning eternity, and Tidal, that's great son, king of nations. So here we're got some people moving in here. Elishar, of course, being oaks, solid, deep-rooted. Verse 2, that these made war with Bera, the son of evil, king of Sodom, and he was evil. With Birsha, and king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Abma, and Shemibur, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. And so it is that they're in this particular area of 3. All these were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. And right there below the Salt Sea, this is where we find Sodom and Gomorrah, basically the very ruins of where God destroyed it. It is believed by archaeologists. For 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. In the 13th year they rebelled. Had enough. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and they smote the Rephaims in Asheroth, Karaim, and Zurims in Ham, and the Emins in Shaveh, Kerathaim. Now, what we've got here is
The old Rephims is one of the name of the fallen ones. You got some bad people within this. Verse 6, and the Horites, you call those cavemen dwellers. Not the cavemen that some teachers would have you think, because there is no such thing, but they were called that because they dwelt in caves. In their Mount Seir, unto El-Pharan, which is by the wilderness. And verse 7, and they returned, and they returned and came to Emishpat, which is Kadesh, holy, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Tamar. And so it was as we move on along. Verse 8, and there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same is Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim. Now, when they're that evil, and when they have all this perversion going on in their cities, do you think God's going to bless them in this battle? I mean, think about it. Look, be real and face reality. Naturally, God's not going to be with them. Verse 9. And Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of the nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, Babylon, and Arioch, king of Elazar, 4 kings with 5. And there we go. I mean, we're marching. We're got enough troops here to take them over. Verse 10. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there. And they that remained fled to the mountain. They were beat badly. And what was left over as they ran into the slime pits. And were certainly defeated by, naturally, you have Kenites. You have leftover Nephilim, which you have some wisdom there that is not good wisdom, but wisdom to do evil, and certainly without God's help, and certainly God was not going to help perverted people. They got their gourds thumped. That's simple. Verse 11. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way. And they cleaned them out. 12. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Now here you have kinsman redeemer, the law of God's land that is just natural, the way kin takes care of kin. Verse 13,